Hello, thanks for taking a look at this video. It's maybe one of the most controversial and more difficult ones I've done because of the topic, and I'm going to be in the minority as to my conclusion. It's December 5th, 2024. I hope you all are having a good winter so far in the Northern Hemisphere. Uh, this time I'm going to concentrate on a book I reread. It came out in 2017, and it, it looks at this guy named Jerry Sandusky, who's still in jail for alleged pedophilia and sexual abuse of young men. This book was written by Mark Pendergrast and the most hated man in America, Jerry Sandusky, and the Rush to Judgment. Uh, Sandusky was imprisoned after a jury trial in June 22nd, 2012. So who is he? All right, so Gerald Sandusky was born in 1944, so he's 80 years old now. And he was convicted of serial child molestation, and he's a retired college football coach. He served mostly at Penn State University under Joe Paterno. He was his assistant at Penn State from 1969 to 1999, serving as defensive coordinator for the final 22 years of his career. In 1977, Sandusky and his wife founded the Second Mile, which is a nonprofit charity serving Pennsylvania's underprivileged and at-risk youth. Following his 1999 retirement from Penn State, he continued working with the Second Mile at Penn State and maintained an office at the university until 2011. So in 2011, following a 2-year grand jury investigation, Sandusky was arrested and charged with 52 counts of sexual abuse of young boys over a 15-year period from 1994 to 2009. Sandusky met his molestation victims through the Second Mile. Several of his victims later testified against Sandusky in his sexual abuse trial. 4 of the charges were subsequently dropped. In 2012, he was found guilty of 45 of the 48 remaining charges. Sandusky was sentenced to 30 to 60 years in prison. He has been incarcerated in the Pennsylvania system since October 31st, 2012. So, on the face of it, you would think, well, they had a jury trial, plenty of evidence, and he's probably guilty, and people like him really need to be taken out of society as quickly as possible. When I worked as a art instructor in a maximum security prison in New Mexico, there I learned very clearly that the people that were most targeted for abuse and perhaps killing inside a prison were men who had harmed children and women. So they are the lowest on the totem pole, even among prisoners. So that's why the title, Most Hated Man in America, I think was appropriate here. Pendergrast comes to the conclusion that Sandusky's innocent. And after reading his book twice and looking at the evidence he comes up with and an analysis of how the trial proceeded and how the victims were coached and perhaps led to believe by therapists and by lawyers that they may have indeed been abused, even though they forgot and didn't say anything at the time. There's a lot there in the book to look at, but the reason I reread it was I reviewed and after reading this book, Unmask Alice by Rick Emerson, that came out 2 years ago, 2022, and it's LSD, Satanic Panic, and the Imposter Behind the World's Most Notorious Diaries. So here's the main diary, Go Ask Alice by Anonymous. It came out in 1971. It became a sensation. People believed that it was written by a real person named Alice, a teenager who eventually committed suicide and got into drugs and all kinds of stuff. And later it leaked out that the person that wrote it was this lady, Beatric Sparks. In 1979, she was already famous. Um, she had gotten a hold of another journal written by a young man that committed suicide that was given to her by the mother, thinking that Beatric Sparks could publish a book that would help young people not commit suicide by looking at her son's journal. Well, Sparks took the journal, there was no contract, embellished it, and turned it into something completely different than what the original intent of the young man's journal was, and turned him into a satanic dabbler and drug user, and basically what the mother of the son later said, knowing this was a misuse of the journal, created a monster out of her son. And it became Jay's journal. And this time, the editor, as you can see, is Beatric Sparks. She was able to put her name to this. Again, people thinking this was the actual journal of a real young man. And she went ahead and wrote quite a few other journals similar to that in this style. She died at age 95, I don't know, some years ago, and never admitting that she'd been a fraud. But in this book, Unmask Alice, we find really clear evidence that the woman was quite an imposter. Um, what what Emerson does in his book is show that this was 1971. This sparked an interest in satanic cults and satanic crime and all of this, and there was suddenly a whole crazy panic about Satanism. In fact, this one law enforcement officer that researched all this and found most of it was just delusional madness of crowds. There was no real satanic panic or systematic satanic cults that were harming people. It was just a panic created by therapists and by law enforcement that were completely misled by their own beliefs rather than proof. So, Satanic Panic came out in 1992 by Jeffrey Victor, and it clearly shows all of his research and how people can get crazy with beliefs and then find circumstantial evidence to circle around their beliefs or their feelings and think they have proof when they don't. What Pendergrast does with The Most Hated Man in America regarding Sandusky is more or less the same thing, show that belief and not proof was guiding the entire trial of Sandusky, and how some of these, in fact, all of the alleged victims that had nothing to say before this started coming up about being abused by Sandusky, suddenly, from pressure from the lawyer and from others, and anyway, it gets kind of complicated, but they changed their story. And now, because it's this very well-known university, millions of dollars were at stake. In fact, I think somebody estimated about $1 billion were spent and on this trial, and its rewards that were sent out. So money was a motivating factor for people to lie, is what it comes down to. Today, Sandusky still maintains his innocence. His wife maintains his innocence. She was with him throughout this whole thing. There was never any evidence in her experience of any of these young boys complaining about Jerry, other than he was like a big kid that liked to horse around with kids. One of the main complaints was that he fooled around with these teenagers in showers. Well, it was very common back then for men and boys to shower together. I mean, I did it as a football player in high school. Our coaches and all the guys would be naked in one big group shower, and we'd horse around, and some people would tickle one another and do some things that were like sexual. It was all fun. Nobody complained about abuse, but this was just the atmosphere of the time, and Sandusky was part of that. His father was part of that, and Sandusky was raised in that kind of a horsing around culture among athletes and in showers and so forth. So But as far as any kind of sexual boundaries being crossed, that was never an issue. And people that knew him intimately, like his wife and others, could see that. Joe Paterno, who was fired because of this, he was the head coach of Penn State, a well-known head coach, and he died soon after he got fired. His whole image was disgraced. The statue that was put up to honor Paterno was taken down from Penn State and has never been restored. This whole thing is based on a kind of a moral panic, is what Pendergrast would call it. And there was a lot at stake. There was political wrangling going on between the governor and the head of the university, as he brings up. I suggest to read the book and read it carefully, because the statement by Pendergrast is quite strong that Sandusky's innocent, and I think he is. But here's something that, take a look at this. Other than Sandusky being very clear, even in his appeals up to this year, which were denied by the court, that they wouldn't allow a retrial as of September. He claims he was innocent, and he's been a model prisoner. So I'm going to read this part out of Pendergast's book. In October 23rd, 2012, Sandusky was moved to the SCI Camp Hill for 8 days of psychological and medical evaluations. The cell was filthy and cold. One of the doctors who examined him was Arif Sheikh, a Pakistani immigrant who was impressed with Sandusky's decency and intelligence. As a physician, I really look at my patients, he recalled. I really see them, and I believe the accusations against Jerry Sandusky have been blown out of proportion. People want to see evil in others, even in the likes of a Mother Teresa. In Jerry's case, people have gone for the drama, not for the reality. Again, just like Emerson does in the Unmask Alice book, it was belief over proof that drove the whole Satanic Panic. Sheikh gave Sandusky a copy of his book, Healing Tips for the Mind, Body, and Soul, one of the many inspirational books that have helped him endure life in prison. Okay, so another investigator, FBI expert, he's here. I'll read what Pendergrast says. Former federal investigator John Snedden, who interviewed players in the Penn State drama soon after the trial, concluded that there was no cover-up because there was nothing to cover up. Mike McQuarrie, who was one of the star witnesses and who kept changing his story, he was a coach at Penn State at one time, had only heard slapping sounds in the shower. If McQuarrie really thought he was witnessing a sexual assault on a child, Snedden said, he would have intervened to stop a wet, defenseless, naked 57-year-old guy in the shower. All of this goes. Anyway, the other thing that Pendergrast brings up is it's almost impossible that someone becomes a pedophile in their 50s, which is what they're accusing Sandusky of. There was absolutely no evidence of that kind of behavior in him when he was younger. So here we go. Snedden said, so if someone that big, like McQuarrie, had thought he witnessed a sexual assault, wouldn't he have intervened to stop a wet, defenseless 57-year-old guy in a shower? Snedden's boss told him as a rookie agent that the first question to ask in an investigation is, where's the crime? In this case, there didn't appear to be one. I've never had a rape case successfully prosecuted based on only sounds and without credible victims and witnesses. And that was the incident that sparked this whole thing, one of two. Snedden concluded that then Governor Tom Corbett orchestrated the Sandusky investigation because Graham Spanier, who was associated with Penn State, had defeated his attempt to slash the Penn State budget. Quote, it's a political vendetta by somebody who had an epic degree of vindictiveness and would apparently stop at nothing, unquote. Then mass hysteria took over. 99% of what happened at Penn State boiled down to people running around yelling, "Oh my God, we've got to do something immediately." There was no investigation, no determination of facts. Instead, the officials running the show at Penn State wanted to move as fast as possible from the scandal by sacrificing a few scapegoats, Sneddon said. The media immediately jumped on board with abuse narrative train. Sadly, he concluded, I think they demonstrated that investigative journalism is dead. So that's a little bit from the book. Again, I emailed the author, and he, had met with Sandusky. He believes the guy is innocent. You can't say 100%, but in my experience working with cult victims and cult members that accuse parents of abuse when nothing went on, I can understand how people can be influenced in order to please a guru or to grift for millions of dollars. We are human. We will lie to get money. And I think that's what happened in the Sandusky case. It's a shame he's still in jail at age 80. I wish him well. And I'm sure that some people listening to this video that would just read the Wikipedia entry on Sandusky would think I'm crazy for trying to defend him. But that's what I've done here. So you can make up your own mind, look at the facts, read Pendergrast's book, read it carefully. Also, I'd say read Satanic Panic and read Unmask Alice. And I think you'll get a clearer idea how people can go into a moral panic and convict an innocent man. Thank you for listening. Hope you have a good day.